Imagine an ancient Chinese general, standing alone in a misty courtyard before dawn. He moves slowly, deliberately, each arm rising and falling like the tide, each step placed with the precision of a chess master. To an outsider watching from the gate, it looks almost like a dance, maybe even like nothing at all. Just an old man moving slowly in the dark. But inside his body, something extraordinary is happening. His heart rate is steady but elevated. His breath is deep and rhythmic. And inside his skull, his brain is lighting up in ways that most people only experience during intense meditation or peak athletic performance. Neurons are firing. Neural pathways are being reinforced. Stress hormones are dropping. And a part of his brain responsible for memory and learning is actually measurably growing. That general lived over 1,000 years ago. But the practice he was doing? Scientists are only now beginning to understand just how powerful it really is. This is the story of Tai Chi, and what it actually does to your brain. For most of its history, Tai Chi Chuan, which translates loosely as Supreme Ultimate Fist, was classified as a martial art. It was born in ancient China, refined over centuries, and passed down through families like a sacred inheritance. It was a fighting system, a philosophy, a spiritual practice, and a form of medicine, all wrapped into one. Western science didn't quite know what to do with it. When researchers first started studying Tai Chi in clinical settings, they struggled to categorize it. It wasn't vigorous enough to be called aerobic exercise in the traditional sense. It wasn't still enough to be called meditation. It wasn't religious enough to be called spiritual practice. It existed in its own category, resisting every label scientists tried to stick on it. But then the brain scans started coming in, and everything changed. To understand what Tai Chi does to your brain, you first need to understand what chronic stress does to it, because the two stories are deeply connected. When you experience stress, your brain triggers the release of a hormone called cortisol. In small doses, cortisol is useful. It sharpens your focus. It gives you energy. It prepares you to respond to a threat. This is the famous fight or flight response. And for most of human history, it served us well. The problem is that modern life keeps that stress response switched on almost permanently. Work pressure, financial anxiety, social media, noise, traffic. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a real physical threat and a stressful email. So it keeps pumping out cortisol. Day after day, week after week. And cortisol, in high chronic doses, is essentially toxic to your brain. It attacks a region called the hippocampus, a small seahorse-shaped structure deep inside your brain that is responsible for memory formation, learning, and emotional regulation. Under prolonged cortisol exposure, hippocampal neurons literally shrink and die. The hippocampus gets smaller. Memory gets worse. Emotional regulation breaks down. The risk of depression and anxiety skyrockets. This is the mechanism behind much of the mental health crisis happening in the modern world. It is not simply a chemical imbalance. It is, in many cases, a brain that has been physically damaged by chronic stress. Now here is where Tai Chi enters the picture. In 2013, researchers at UCLA published a study examining the brains of older adults who practiced Tai Chi regularly. What they found stopped many in the scientific community in their tracks. The Tai Chi practitioners had significantly larger hippocampal volume compared to control groups. Their brains, specifically the region most vulnerable to stress damage, were not just preserved. They were, in measurable, visible ways, bigger. This was extraordinary. Because by the time most people reach their 60s and 70s, hippocampal shrinkage is considered almost inevitable. It is one of the hallmarks of normal aging. The brain gets smaller. Memory fades. That's just how it goes. Except, apparently, if you practice Tai Chi. The researchers proposed that Tai Chi was triggering a process called neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons. For decades, scientists believed that adults could not grow new brain cells. that you were born with a certain number, and that number only went down from there. But in the late 1990s, that assumption was shattered. Adults can grow new neurons. And certain activities, exercise, meditation, learning, appear to accelerate that process. Tai Chi, it turns out, hits all three of those triggers simultaneously. Think about what Tai Chi actually requires of you in any given moment during practice. Your body is moving. Not aggressively, not frantically, but consistently and deliberately. Your muscles are engaged. Your cardiovascular system is working. Blood is flowing to your brain at an elevated rate, carrying oxygen and nutrients, and triggering the release of a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Scientists sometimes call BDNF miracle grow for the brain. It promotes the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new ones. Exercise is one of the most powerful triggers for BDNF release known to science. But here's the thing. Your mind is also doing something extraordinary at the same time. Every movement in Tai Chi requires intense, focused attention. You are not zoning out. You are not letting your mind wander through your to-do list or your anxieties. You are fully present in your body, tracking the position of every limb, coordinating your breath with your movement, sensing your balance, feeling the flow from one posture to the next. This is mindfulness in its most embodied, physical form. And that quality of attention has its own profound effects on the brain. Studies on mindfulness meditation have shown that regular practice increases gray matter density in areas of the brain associated with self-awareness, compassion, and introspection. It thickens the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and impulse control. And it reduces the size and reactivity of the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, which is chronically overactive in people with anxiety and depression. Tai Chi delivers these same benefits. Because Tai Chi is meditation. Just meditation in motion. And then there is the third layer. Tai Chi forms are complex. Learning them requires memory, coordination, and the constant integration of new information. Your brain is essentially solving a slow, graceful puzzle for the duration of every practice session. This kind of cognitive engagement, learning, adapting, refining, is one of the most powerful ways to build what neuroscientists call cognitive reserve. Think of cognitive reserve as your brain's resilience. Its ability to keep functioning well even as it ages, even as it faces damage or disease. People with high cognitive reserve get Alzheimer's disease later. They recover better from strokes. They maintain sharper thinking into old age. Exercise, mindfulness, cognitive engagement. Tai Chi delivers all three at the same time, in a single flowing practice. There is another piece of this story that rarely gets told. And it involves a network of brain regions that most people have never heard of, but which may be at the center of some of the most common forms of human suffering. It is called the default mode network, or DMN. The default mode network is what your brain does when it is not focused on anything in particular. When you are daydreaming. When your mind is wandering. When you are lying awake at 3 in the morning, replaying an awkward conversation from 6 years ago, or catastrophizing about a future that may never come. The default mode network is, in many ways, the home of the inner critic, the narrator that never stops talking, the voice that judges and worries and ruminates and second guesses. In people with depression, anxiety, and PTSD, the default mode network is hyperactive. It runs constantly loudly, pulling the person out of the present moment and into a loop of negative thought patterns that can feel impossible to escape. Here is what researchers have found about Tai Chi practitioners. Their default mode network activity is significantly reduced during and after practice. The constant mental chatter quiets down. The inner critic loses its volume. The brain shifts out of its default rumination mode and into a state of present moment awareness that persists even after the practice session ends. This is not just relaxation. This is a measurable change in how the brain operates. And for people who have spent years trapped in cycles of anxiety or depression, the relief this represents cannot be overstated. Most people, when they think about the brain and movement, think about motor cortex, the strip of brain tissue that sends signals to your muscles to make them contract. But there is another region of the brain that is deeply involved in movement, and which Tai Chi appears to influence in remarkable ways. It sits at the back and bottom of your skull, and it is called the cerebellum. The cerebellum is sometimes called the little brain. It contains roughly half of all the neurons in your entire brain, packed into a structure roughly the size of a fist. Its primary job is coordination, making sure your movements are smooth, precise, and well-timed. But in recent decades, neuroscientists have discovered that the cerebellum does far more than that. The cerebellum is deeply connected to the prefrontal cortex. It plays a role in cognitive processing, emotional regulation, and even language. When the cerebellum is not functioning well, due to injury, disease, or simply disuse, the effects ripple out across many aspects of brain function. Tai Chi is one of the most cerebellar demanding activities a person can engage in. The slow, controlled movements require constant fine-tuning of balance and coordination. The shifting of weight from one foot to the other, the precise placement of hands and arms, the integration of breath with motion, all of this is cerebellar work. And like a muscle, the cerebellum responds to use. It gets stronger, more efficient, better connected to the rest of the brain. Studies on Tai Chi practitioners have shown improvements in balance and coordination that far exceed what would be expected from ordinary aging. Falls, one of the leading causes of serious injury and death in older adults, are dramatically reduced in people who practice Tai Chi regularly. But the benefits are not just physical. As the cerebellum strengthens, its positive influence on cognitive and emotional function strengthens too. Here is what is remarkable about all of this science. The ancient masters who developed and refined Tai Chi over centuries had no brain scanners. They had no knowledge of cortisol or BDNF or the default mode network. They could not measure hippocampal volume or map the default mode network. And yet they understood, not in the language of neuroscience, but in the language of lived experience and careful observation. They knew what this practice did to the human mind. They called it cultivating Shen, the spirit or mind. They spoke of the practice quieting the heart-mind, of bringing clarity and stillness to inner chaos. They described the way regular practice made practitioners calmer, sharper, more emotionally balanced, more resilient. They built entire philosophical frameworks around the connection between slow, intentional movement and mental transformation. They were right. They were just right in ways that took modern science centuries to verify. The ancient Taoist concept of Wu Wei, effortless action, flowing with rather than against, turns out to be a remarkably accurate description of what happens in the brain during Tai Chi practice. The default mode network quiets. The prefrontal cortex engages. The amygdala calms. The person moves not from a place of force or struggle, but from a place of integrated, whole brain harmony. It would be easy to look at all of this science and conclude that Tai Chi is something for older people, for retirees in parks, for people managing chronic illness or recovering from injury. But that conclusion misses something important. The pressures that make Tai Chi most valuable, chronic stress, cognitive overload, emotional dysregulation, the relentless noise of modern life, these are not problems that begin in old age. They begin young. They build quietly for decades before they manifest as memory loss, or depression, or a sense that something important has been lost somewhere along the way. The research on cognitive reserve is unambiguous. The time to build it is not when you need it. The time to build it is long before you need it. Every practice session is a deposit into a neurological account that pays dividends for the rest of your life. Young professionals under chronic work stress. Students overwhelmed by anxiety. parents running on empty, athletes looking for an edge in focus and recovery. Anyone who has ever felt like their mind is working against them rather than for them. Tai Chi is for all of them. There is one final thing the science reveals that deserves to be said clearly. The benefits of Tai Chi are not fleeting. They are not the kind of thing that disappear the moment you stop doing it. Like all genuine neurological change, they accumulate over time. They compound. A person who practices Tai Chi for 10 years does not simply have 10 years' worth of relaxation. They have a brain that has been fundamentally reshaped, more resilient, more connected, more capable of sustaining itself through the challenges of a long human life. The ancient general in the misty courtyard understood this. He was not exercising. He was not meditating in any way his culture would have called meditation. He was doing something that had no single name, because it was too whole, too complete, to be reduced to a single category. Modern neuroscience has finally given us the language to describe what he was doing. He was growing his brain, calming his mind, building a body and a nervous system capable of meeting the world with clarity, stability, and grace. And he was doing it one slow, deliberate, extraordinary movement at a time.